Hi there, I'm Adam Wright. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the show. Every week, I try to bring you interesting interviews and commentary related to some of the more pressing issues of the day. Our discussions range from politics to entertainment, even some lifestyle issues. And if you like what you hear, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. And you can also always visit my website at theadamwrightshow.com. Most importantly, tell your friends. I really appreciate it. So when Governor Charlie Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito announced they would not run for third terms, it paved the way for a potentially interesting primary election season in the governor's race, with particular attention to the down ballot races that will follow. And of course, all the top ticket open seats potentially means that there are some legislative openings that really provide an interesting election year. And to help break this down for us is I like to call him the dean of the Massachusetts political pundits, and somebody who not only has been around mass politics for decades, but somebody with the unique experience of working on presidential campaigns around the country and even abroad as a political consultant. He brings a nuanced perspective to politics, and it is my pleasure to welcome Tony Cignoli. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Adam, this is great. Thanks for having me, man.
Well, I'm so happy to have you because there's a lot going on right now in the Massachusetts political sphere. And you've got your finger on, I think, on the pulse of so many of these races. And this is really the first time, I have to think, in decades that we have had this kind of this kind of opening that then translates to down ballot races being open.
Absolutely. I mean, from governor and lieutenant governor, state auditor, Suzanne Bump deciding not to run for re-election and opening that seat up, certainly. Maura Healey running for governor opens up AG. And then you've got another race that's it looks like it might be hotly contested right now. Secretary of the Commonwealth, Bill Galvin, going for an amazing run. He will be the longest serving secretary or anyone in his position. Is called different things in different states. Here we call it the Secretary of the Commonwealth, or other states call it Secretary of State. But he will be the longest serving Secretary of State in American history if he wins re-election. But you're right, it clicks all other kind of races, local legislative races that are of interest to folks in Western Massachusetts, for the Senate, for the House. Lots of domino effect going on this year, Adam.
Well, let's talk about let's take the top ticket and work our way down.
Okay.
Of course, running for governor, who's already announced, is the current AG, Maura Healey. Do you see anybody else on the Democratic side jumping in? And can anybody surpass somebody like Maura Healey's money and recognition?
There you go right off the bat. Does anybody else trump in on the Democratic side? Probably not right now. Maura Healey is such a dominant force in this race. The name recognition, the money she's already got on hand. She comes into this with about $4 million the day that she announced. A little shy of that. I haven't checked her latest fundraising tally, but she's there. And on top of that, Healey doesn't just have name recognition in Massachusetts, Adam, but as we know, she's got national name recognition. She's going to be able to raise money from around America, largely because of the battles that she's taken on as AG. Big pharma, big oil, Donald Trump. What state attorney general sued the president of the United States more than Maura Healey? I think she's got the record on that for going after Trump. So she's got all of that. So she really comes into this thing and takes up a lot of the air. Sonia Chang Diaz, very energetic also. For anyone looking at the two of them at the top of this right now, as certainly Healey's the front runner, it's a daunting task. There is another fellow who's taken out papers on the Democratic side, someone I actually know, Orlando Silva. He'd have to raise an awful lot of money. He's got to do a lot of work to build name recognition. A Brazilian background. He's from Brazil, or his family is. It'll help to be able to speak Portuguese, but you got a long way to go, without a doubt, for him to really enter into this thing. But bluntly, just to answer your question, I'm not even hearing a name anymore on the Democratic side. It's pretty well established that Healey's the major domo here, and that Chang Diaz will be a player, at least into the caucuses, perhaps.
Well, what's so interesting to me is that, in Massachusetts, we love our liberal legislators and then we love our Republican governors. But on the Republican side this year, there are now, two candidates for governor. You've got former state rep Jeff Deal, who announced, he had announced a primary challenge to Baker before Baker said he wasn't running.
Right, yeah.
And he is a Trumper, correct?
Big time, absolutely.
Which may give him some help in a primary, but doesn't really hold, I would think, much hope for him for a general. But just recently, we also had a businessman from Rentham, Chris Doughty, I think is his name.
Exactly.
And he entered the race. How do you think that's going to shape up with a more moderate Republican going up against somebody like Jeff Deal?
You said it right on target. It comes down to, first and foremost, they've got to get past the primary. And in the primary, that's when Republicans will come out to vote. They'll get out there for Jeff Deal. People are familiar with him. He's got some name recognition amongst that more conservative Republican base, that pro-Trump base, anti-vax base, anti-Charlie Baker base. It's hard to believe that there is such a thing in the Republican Party, but there is. Mass GOP, an organization separate from the Republican State Committee, very active along with Fiscal Alliance and a few other more conservative groups. Massachusetts, just a few days ago, named the most liberal state in the United States of America. And that's fact. We see that in polling, et cetera. But when it comes down to that Republican base, I always think back to 2016. More than 1 million people in Massachusetts voted for Donald Trump. So certainly to get to that million mark, it had to be more than Republicans. For Deal or Doughty, both in their own caucuses, in their own primary, Adam, and in the general, they've got to pick up unenrolled and independent voters. That's how Charlie Baker won the governorship in the first place. You remember he ran first and lost. The first time he ran and lost, he was running really more as that regular middle of the road Republican. When he changed his running mate, certainly to Karen Polito, who was a heck of a lot more feisty and a great running mate for him, and he started to change his message, how he spoke. He was able to attract those folks who aren't part of the Republican or Democratic Party. He was able to make his case, and he got a lot of crossover for Democrats. So initially, for Deal versus Doughty, they've got to win Republican base. Right now, Deal would have the name recognition there. You would have that base of folks who are active. As I say, the pro-Trump, anti-vax crowd that does exist, despite this being the most liberal state, in the nation. That base is still there in different places throughout Massachusetts.
It's so funny that you say that about Baker and how he ran. I remember all the times I've interviewed him on the radio show. I would say to him, you realize in Idaho you're a liberal Democrat. And I guess it's all about perspective. But I also noticed a difference as he ran in 2014, he did not like running for office. This was a guy that I don't think he liked politics. And he certainly was never used to having anyone challenge him. Here was a guy who was a very successful CEO, right? Wasn't used to having that kind of scrutiny for sure. And I had found him to be really standoffish while he was running. And then once he became governor, I think he's a guy that really grew into the position and really embraced it for what it was. And I think by all accounting, I think there are people that have had significant problems with him, as you mentioned, people on the right, obviously with the vaccine mandates and with literally shutting the state down for a couple months. But also people on the left who still see him as a Republican, who don't feel that he acted quickly enough when COVID hit. And then the other thing is his, I think, lack of attention to the situation at the soldiers' home here in Holyoke when that happened. So that turned a lot of people off too. But it's interesting to see, how these things play out because Massachusetts is so liberal. And I think, I know a lot of Democrats, I know you do too, who voted for him. Because they feel as I do, and I don't know if you feel the same way. And I try not to ask you your own opinion about these things because I know this is how you make your living. But I like the balance of having somebody in the governor's corner office who's not necessarily the same party as the wide influence of Democrats on Beacon Hill.
You're on target, and there's a lot of people in Massachusetts, obviously, that feel the same way. Not just with Baker Polito, but you can go back to 1990 with Weld Cellucci. I mean,
Right.
it was astonishing that Bill Weld won the state then, when the Democratic Party apparatus was even stronger at a state level, the state committee, et cetera, than it might be considered to be right now. You know, the number one party in Massachusetts right now is unenrolled / independent, not Democrat or Republican. We may be a very liberal state, but there's an awful lot of folks who are so liberal, you can almost say to a certain degree, there's a libertarian kind of a strain there. And you're right. We like balance. We've seen it how many times now? Cellucci getting reelected on his own merit. Mitt Romney, gosh, you're so on target too with Charlie Baker. There was a great line by Socrates: seldom is the great politician also the great public servant. And Charlie Baker really didn't like politics. Well said on your part, Adam, and you knew him well from all the times that he came on the radio station, which I always really kind of appreciated on his part and on your part. You had the format for him in Western Massachusetts, but also that he was sharp enough to go on and talk to the base of folks in the geographic area that you reached out to. But Baker really didn't like politics. And when you really take a look at his two campaigns, it's a great study for folks like me, the political scientists, the pundits, et cetera, to see the difference between Baker 1 and Baker 2. I would say this, not to go too long on Charlie Baker, what benefited him greatly when he ran the second time and won was two women, his own wife telling him, listen, CEO, I love you, guy, but you got to loosen it up, buddy, and he did. I went away. He started eating hot dogs out in public. He started getting a lot more comfortable and with folks and taking himself less seriously. And then there was the other woman, and that was Karen Polito. So you had this firebrand of an individual, Polito, who really brought to him a understanding of street politics and street savvy, and she was phenomenal for him. A big difference as his running mate than former Senator Tsai, who ran with him the first time.
Right. We're talking to Tony Cignoli, political consultant. Were you surprised? I don't know that anybody was surprised that Baker said he wasn't going to run for a third term, but were you surprised that Polito didn't run for the governorship?
I was shocked, Adam. Absolutely shocked. It was something that everyone accepted, is that if he did not run, that she would run. She had been raising money, more money than he had raised over the last year. She was active. She was out there going to events, raising money. It was interesting to me to watch how many Democrats looked like they would stay the course with her, because as lieutenant governor, she's made the rounds, whether it be to House members or mayors or others of the Democratic Party representing a city, a town, a Senate district. And she shows up. The other thing that we all knew about Polito, Democrat, Republican, like her, not like her, she'd return a phone call. She would get on top of something. She would get involved in state issues. She was, I think, one of the most involved lieutenant governors as far as being willing to take on bureaucracy. Most definitely a champion of taking on mass DOT, which usually is not possible. I mean, that's a fiefdom unto itself. She would have been a difficult for Maura Healey to deal with overall. That would have been the bigger battle, the bigger fight for Healey or for Kane Diaz or whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Right. Do you think that she has changed the model of what the lieutenant governor does in the Commonwealth?
It's not just her. That's a great question. I would say yes, as far as having moved it to another level. But there's been lieutenant governors before her. Certainly a big name, lieutenant governor, Tommy O'Neill, Dukakis, who did not stand in that shadow of Mike Dukakis. Even more so, John Kerry. A lot of folks forget this guy was lieutenant governor. Had he not been lieutenant governor, there would have been no United States Senator, Secretary of State, and all the rest for John Kerry, right? But those two players really were the ones that started to change it. I've said this a few times publicly, I think in the Globe and a few other places. Karen Polito was the kind of lieutenant governor where if she had 15 minutes between events and she drove by a Dunkin' Donuts and there were 30 people in, she would stop in to talk to those 30 people. One of the most, oh my goodness, omnipresent, indomitable, energetic campaigners I think I had ever seen. And that's why a lot of us thought Polito versus Healey, if that had been the ultimate matchup, that really would have been something.
Well, let's talk about, with Maura Healey, running for governor. Before we get to the lieutenant governor's races, that opens up, obviously, a hole for AG.
Yeah.
And we've already seen quite a few. I don't remember the last time we've seen this many candidates, this many big candidates enter the AG's race. We have former legal counsel to Deval Patrick, Andrea Campbell, coming in, right?
Yeah.
She was the city council president in Boston, wasn't she?
Exactly. Thank you. You're right on target with that. Yeah, and that's a feat in itself to become council president, not just to get elected to the Boston City Council, as you know, but just to become president. That takes some politics. Yeah.
We now have also Shannon Liss Riordan.
Yeah.
Who's, I guess she's a labor attorney, I think.
Yes.
Quentin Palfrey, who ran for lieutenant governor.
That's right. Formerly of the Barack Obama administration. Yeah.
How do you think this race is going to go?
Name recognition yet again, money yet again. And these are the three that we're aware of. And I don't think we'll see too many other names enter in unless these three don't pick up a lot of traction. That's what we see in my side of the aisle right now, my side of the profession. We're watching to see, can these three raise the kind of money, raise the profile that they need to soon? We would be looking to see by mid-March where they're at before we would advise someone else even take a look at getting in. But I think what we are seeing right now is a very aggressive campaign from Andrea Campbell. Traditional in a lot of ways. When she announced, a great example, she did the new age of video and social and digital media, but also she made the rounds of the state. It was impressive to see how many stops she made within about 36 hours. Palfrey has run for office before. He's got some good contacts, certainly in the Obama administration. And Liz Riordan, interesting. Liz Riordan, forgive me, I'm not saying her last name correctly. She's got some dough. She's got some money. And this is a race that's going to take a lot of money, Adam, because there's no real name recognition for these three people just yet, And that's what this is going to take. An awful lot of money to expend now, because again, they've got to get past the Democratic convention. And I know you and I over the years have talked about the Massachusetts Democratic Convention. You get there, you've got to get 15% of that room on that day. It's not just winning a popular vote amongst Democrats, but out of the convention, if you don't get your 15%, you don't go on. So that's what these three are starting to think about right now. It's going to be a very, very aggressive run for all three of them. Right now, a lot of people in Massachusetts aren't tuned into this. They don't know who the candidates are. These three candidates, they're dialing for dollars. They're dialing for delegates every single day and night.
I was thinking the biggest recipients of this year's political season are going to be pollsters and the TV stations. I mean, the pollsters, they're just going to open up the bank accounts, right?
Absolutely, because it's not just polling to find out where you're at as a candidate, but what are the issues that matter to people? What is it that's going to resonate, not just with the players in your own party that you need initially, but for the larger universe of voters that you're going to need in the general election. This is not a shoot in the dark kind of a game when you're looking at spending millions of dollars to win these constitutional seats. You've got to know that the issues that you're talking about, what you're advocating for the people of Massachusetts, is what they're interested in right now, too. And there's a lot of things you can assume about our electorate. The most liberal state, that, there's 1.1 or 1.3 million people that voted for Donald Trump in 2016. It's a state that likes its Republican governor with its Democratic legislature, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of other unique things right now, Adam, and I see it in some of the polling we've seen to this point. In the quality of life stuff, there's a misery index that's there even in Massachusetts, where a lot of Massachusetts voters will think of bigger issues, social issues, philosophical and ideological issues, but it'll still come down for a lot of them, the price of milk, the price of a gallon of gasoline, what's it taking to get their kid into college, what's happening in their municipality for their school system. It still comes down to a lot of those things. They want the big ideas from some of these candidates, but at the same time, they want the basics taken care of. And that can't be missed by some of these candidates as they go after unenrolled independent candidates and folks who might not be, tied into one or the other ideology that are dominant on the alt-left or the alt-right.
We're speaking with Tony Cignoli, political consultant extraordinaire, a guy who has really a great understanding of how all these races break down. And let's talk about the big one, right? Yeah. I think this is the first time in 40 years we have seen 5 Democrats in a race for lieutenant governor.
Yes.
And that's just so far.
Yeah, good, well said. Because I think for lieutenant governor, you've got a few other folks that are still kicking it around, immediately starting to think that, gosh, with at this moment 6 announced candidates raising money out there, going at it, that they might, be in a situation where they literally carve up the initial vote that's out there. And bear in mind what I had said a little earlier too, that we've talked about so many times over the years, on the radio station, et cetera, on your show, that again, you've got to get into that convention, these folks, and grab 15%. Well, you've got 6 candidates right now. You get a major domo in this thing. Who's got the millions that it's going to take, or who's got some name recognition, some star power? It's possible for that person to be able to move into the convention and do it. However, I would say right now, and I don't want to sound biased or too local on this, Eric Lesser, state senator, second Hamden, Hampshire Senate district, someone that we're familiar with in Western Mass, he's raised $1 million. That's shocking. It's shocking. And he's got a network of folks that go back to his time with Barack Obama. He's able to raise money from around the country. And in Massachusetts, some of the names that are with him, I was stunned, Adam, when Steve Grossman, even before Eric actually announced, endorsed him for lieutenant governor. So here we've got the former treasurer of Massachusetts, Steve Grossman, but bigger, the former executive director of the Democratic National Committee, a guy that can raise money. And he endorsed that early. And he's got a lot of other folks that are out there very publicly formed. Certainly someone that can't vote in Massachusetts, but he's got, no less than David Axelrod speaking for him in the Globe.
Well, I think one of the things, and maybe it's definitely a double-edged sword, although it certainly will help him in Boston, and I want to talk about this East-West divide in a second.
Yeah.
But, you've got Eric Lesser, who, from his very first campaign, has raised the majority of his money from out of state.
Yeah.
And that is guys like Axelrod and other people that were associated, David Plouffe, people that were associated with the Obama presidency that are helping him out. And, of course, who knows? We may even see his former boss show up to help.
Sure.
How do you think that's going to break out?
Interesting. Eric had dealt with that before when he ran for the Senate, and we've seen a lot of other major players have to deal with that as well. On different level, different playing field. Elizabeth Warren, others, etc. There was a study done not all that long ago, which the New York Times reported on. Like, what is the impact of money? I'll tell you, 10, 20 years ago, we'd have a field day with the candidate that raised the most big dollars, who got the biggest corporate backing, the biggest players, etc. Well, gosh, if they got that kind of backing, how can they be for you, the person in Ludlow or Athol or Methuen or Newman? That's changed now. Electorates expect candidates who are going to be successful to be able to raise money from anywhere. It used to matter. It's changed an awful lot. What we saw too is that in Massachusetts, even more so, folks didn't really care that much as to where the money was coming from, unless there was something egregious. You're getting your money from big pharma, from big oil, etc. That doesn't play in Massachusetts. It's okay if you're Joe Manchin, right? In his state, to be able to take money from big coal, etc. So you can get away with that there. But in Massachusetts, I guess what I would say to truly try to answer that question, it's not so much who it's coming from, but what they represent. There, I think for Eric Lesser and for the others that are running for lieutenant governor, Hines, Kim Driscoll, they're folks that are known to have high ethical standard and at the same time have an ideological view of who it is that's with them. They won't take money from certain folks. So there was a time, Adam, right on target. That was a big issue. We've seen it brought up how many times in different races, right? And it just hasn't resonated with the electorate. They haven't cared so much about that as they have about, well, where's the candidate stand in my family? Yeah.
Well, two of the things that are important to me, I think, as a resident of Western Mass, is for the first time, we're seeing 2 candidates, and we'll talk about Adam Hines in a second, but, having representation from Western Mass is something that I think is important to us. We have been left behind. For so many people in the eastern part of the state ends at 495.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've always thought was just brilliant about Eric Lesser was his commitment to this East-West rail, which I think is an absolute magic bullet for both sides of the state, right?
Yeah,
It brings us
yeah.
the ability to get into Boston and potentially to work in Boston where some of the better jobs are. And for people who work in Boston to be able to have and have lived in the greater Boston area, which the cost of housing is just
Yeah.
off the charts, to give them the opportunity to come out here and find a less expensive place to live, but also add to our tax rolls and and improve our communities. I think that it's such a win-win. So I've always been a big fan of Eric Lesser. I think that he has a lot of integrity, and I really am very happy that he's in this race because if nothing else, it will bring attention to this part of the state. Another person from Western Mass, a little further west, is Pittsfield State Senator Adam Hines,
Yeah.
who is looking at the lieutenant governor race. Tell us about him.
Good guy, hardworking. One of those folks you look at and you say, gosh, this is somebody you'd like to have as your next door neighbor, just like Eric Lesser. There's very, very similar in their philosophical and ideological beliefs and background. The difficulty for Adam Hines will be right now having to assert, himself in the four western counties and Worcester County to try to get past that juggernaut that is Eric Lesser. Lesser's predominance in media, the money that he's got on hand, that makes it a little bit difficult for an Adam Hines, who had been in the race longer, obviously, than Senator Lesser. Their issues are very, very similar. Lesser seems to have the louder platform for these, especially as you just mentioned on East-West Rail. This is the guy that started beating that drum. And at first, everybody thought he was crazy. Then all of a sudden, he gets the backing of the chairman of Ways and Means, Richie Neal. All of a sudden, other members of Congress, other senators, other folks. And though Charlie Baker very much against it in the get-go, in the beginning, remember how Baker stopped any funding of legitimate
studies
being done on it. And then Baker came around because everybody's come around on this. We all just know that if you're in Boston and you're getting killed and housing costs, you might want to be able to take a look at Ware, Warren, Worcester, Springfield, even Pittsfield, right? To be able to go back and forth. But to be more germane to this, for Adam Hines right now, Eric Lesser entering into the race is really the biggest challenge that he's got because Lesser is such a major domo political player here. Certainly, too, you've got Kim Driscoll in the race, the mayor of Salem. Certainly, it's not like being the mayor of Boston. Women, I think she's targeting, looking in that direction. And for her, the problem becomes a candidate, again, like Lesser, who's got early support already from a lot of women's groups. If you take a look at his OCPF, his fundraising list, you've got some pretty major names there of women who are on board. And we know how this works with 6 in the race already, too. Brett Barrow, Scott Donahue, who am I leaving out? Tammy Goella.
Guerrera, yeah.
Thank you.
What's the name? Govera, right?
Yeah, you're right. It is Govera, yeah.
From Acton, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these folks, challenge for them right now to raise the kind of money that they're going to need to get their message to the folks that they need to for the caucuses, for the conventions. Bear that in mind, too, right now, Adam, for the real locks to get into this stuff, we're watching the fact these caucuses are already happening. I'll get real local, hyper local, and West Springfield just had its caucuses this past weekend. Those delegates are in place. Those are the super players that these folks have to go after. And it's the same in a lot of other cities and towns throughout Massachusetts. All this stuff is already happening. And what did we see over the last few weeks? Lesser Driscoll out there going to these caucuses, making the rounds, et cetera.
Yeah, and of course, with Eric Lesser jumping into the race, his seat then becomes open, his Senate seat.
Oh, yeah.
I know that Jake Oliveira has switched his campaign committee over to Senate. Anybody else that you see that's going to take a look at Lesser's seat that we haven't heard from yet?
Well, yeah, there's one other announced candidate, Sidney Levin Epstein. I know her well. An aide, formerly an aide to Ed Markey. I should recuse myself on this one. Sidney was an intern in my office.
Oh, kidding.
Yeah, amazing young lady. And here's one. When she left us, she went to work for Shimon Peres in Israel. So, I mean, holy smokes. I mean, look at some of these young people, Sidney, Jake, and I say, oh my gosh, at that age, sure, I was involved in politics already, but not thinking I'd put my name out there like this and being able to converse on issues, et cetera. So these two are in the race right now. But Adam, that's what's unique right now. There's only two people running for the seat. And I've been around a long time. I'm old, but I've never seen this particular seat, this Senate seat, open without a whole bunch of folks running. 8 years ago, when Lesser ran and won, think of all the other people that were in that race on the Democratic side. Aaron Sanders, Tim Allen, Chip Harrington come to mind immediately. And there were others as well. When Gail Kendaris announced she was not running for re-election and instead looking to run for registrar of probate, that seat opened and all these players jumped in. Let me riff for just a second on this too, because maybe this is key to some of the things we've talked about in the past, and even you touch on right now, Western Mass kind of getting forgotten. This isn't just any state Senate seat. This is the state Senate seat Lesser holds, I should say, forgive me, that Kendaris held and that Brian Lee's held. You got three major domos, whether you like them, hate them, Democrat, Republican. Lee's was a Republican. My gosh, not just a Republican. He was the minority leader of the Massachusetts Senate. There was a group of Republicans to be led, not the numbers they have right now. But Lee's, Kendaris, and Lesser, their names are on laws, on legislation. No Brian Lee's, no Mass Mutual Center in Springfield, no Hall of Fame in Springfield. And certainly you got to give a lot of credit to the majority leader of the Senate at that time, Linda Melconian. The fact, Adam, that the majority leader of the Senate and the minority leader of the Senate, the two leaders in the Massachusetts Senate at the same time, both came from Springfield, Melconian and Lee's, in different parties, they'd fight like cats and dogs, legendary fights. And yet at the end of the day, they'd get stuff done. And I guess that's kind of where I go with some of this right now. I'm old. I remember names like Schiavelli. I remember Iris Holland, Kenny Lemansky, Paul Karen, Michael Walsh, and the name Mullins, chairman of Ways and Means out of Ludlow. We had major domos that made our voices heard in Western Mass. Really old. When I was a kid, I can remember there was a speaker named Botley from Holyoke. At the same time, the Senate president was from Holyoke, a dear friend to me, Mossy Donahue. And before my time, from Ludlow, Jim Thompson was the Speaker of the House. The lights on the turnpike, as you and I come back from Boston and we start seeing like street lights on the turnpike as we head into the Ludlow exit, that was Thompson. He wanted those lights up so you could see when he was getting close to home, with his massive Chrysler Imperial with the 440 engine. Again, I riff on a lot of history and whatnot, but yeah, that's what I'm worried about right now, Adam. Who makes that noise for us? Maybe it's great if there's a lieutenant governor in Boston that makes noise. But you need other legislators to do it.
Well, I think, what you're saying, Tony, is 100% true. And it's magnified when the bomb went off recently, when the dean of the Western Mass delegation, Joe Wagner, said he's not running. I mean, you talk about a guy with influence on Beacon Hill.
Amen.
And he's held that Chicopee State House seat for over 30 years.
31 years. At the end of his time, it'll be 32 years. And I so dig you for bringing up his name. Certainly Joe is one of the most understated, laid-back people I've ever met in the legislature. You would not know the power this guy has had. It was Wagner that speaker after speaker looked to do the tough jobs. Hey, go figure out this whole situation with, phones, cell phones and cars, and how do we have, hey, go figure out casino gambling. Remember when we couldn't get anywhere in Massachusetts on gaming?
Right.
It was Wagner in the House and Rosenberg in the Senate, two Western Mass guys that ultimately were the players that forged, the final piece to move forward. Joe's been there time and time again. He quietly brings it back to his district. I'll say this too, if I'm not sounding too political. This is someone who could easily have just stayed in that seat. Again, no one was going to run against him. He's not getting chased out of his seat or anything like that. In Chicopee, guy is an icon. He's a legend, He's such a part of Chicopee politics, Chicopee municipal life, etc. He didn't have to go. But you're right. His exit is the one. Man, that's what I miss about you so much, Adam. On radio, etc. Kind of thing that you got to a lot of folks. This isn't just a rank and file member. This is assistant majority leader of the House, someone who's got this speaker and how many speakers before him, years, and a guy that got things done in a big way. I would introduce him on occasion at different events that I might be the MC for, and I would call him the Speaker of Western Massachusetts, our Speaker of the House for Western Mass, 495 West. He not only had the seniority, he was the guy. Everybody went to him. Now he's going. Wow. Who replaces him? For all, not just for his district, Adam, but for Western Massachusetts. Who replaces Wagner?
Yeah, well, I mean that's going to be a very interesting race to watch because it's such a small district that it's really limited
Yeah,
to people who obviously who live there. And
yeah,
you've
yeah.
got our friend Joel McAuliffe, who
Yes, Joel McAuliffe.
represents Ward
Yeah,
One, but is also, and this is how it's all so tied in together, right? He's a staffer to Eric
yeah.
Lesser.
That's right. That's right. And interesting because Joel has basically said, I got to take a look at this when asked by media. Others have bowed out already, which is unusual too. And almost in the vein of the fact that, gosh, you've only got two people running for the Senate seat. On this, I thought you'd see a lot of people right away line up. Goodness gracious, Eric Dumbros has made it clear not running. There was a thought he might get in. Bill Quachesny, who had run against Wagner, I think in 2014, has already announced, no, I will not run. And there's a few others too who have taken a look and basically made it clear I'm not running. So Joel seems to be the predominant name right now that people are talking about, Joel
Yeah.
McAuliffe. But we'll see. And it's a seat that does not include all of Chicopee. A couple of parts of Chicopee are not in this district. That's the other thing too, Adam. You know, for the open Senate seat, for Wagner's seat, for all the seats right now, you've got redistricting that has occurred. Not every member of the legislature who's running for reelection is running in the district that they ran in just 2 years ago. You know, some have changed. Joe Comerford's district has changed so much when you look to the north. He lost 6 communities and picked up a bunch of others that are very. She's moved towards Worcester County.
And Eric Lesser's district is going to change.
Big time. There's a lot of new stuff in his district. He's got South Hadley. So if you're running for Lesser's open seat, you know, you've got to be able to play in a place like South Hadley, in Ludlow, in Belchertown, in Longmeadow, Munson, Palmer, half of the city of Springfield. Think how different those different municipalities are within that district. Ludlow does not have a heck of a lot in common with Longmeadow.
Right.
East Longmeadow is very different than South Hadley. You've got some real different niches and groups of folks you've got to reach out to.
Well, this has been very interesting. But before I let you go, Tony Cignoli, I've got one question, and I don't know that anybody is going to be able to answer this. And I bet if you think hard enough, you're going to know where this is going. But after the retirement from politics of our friend, one Mr. Billy Tranghese, chief of staff to Richie Neal, a lot of people have been speculating that this may be the time for Richie to finally say, "I'm not going to run." What's your take on that?
Interesting. So here we've got the chairman of Ways and Means for the 1st Congressional District, Richie Neal. It's obvious what he's brought back, what he means to us. And I'll try to say this as shortly as I can. Yeah, I was surprised when Billy Tranghese, one of the most amazing legislative players in Washington. I mean, from John Lewis to Pelosi to so many, everyone knew who Billy was. Billy was the go-to guy. I might get myself in trouble for speaking out of school here. He was the kind of player, so adept at what he did so well that I understand that there were times when Chairman Neal would loan him out to other members of the House. You know, you need a hand on this or a hand on that. I'll send Billy over. So Billy leaving now certainly at least does one thing. It reminds us that the clock ticks. What I believe is that Chairman Neal will run for re-election because he's always been good about making sure that he telegraphs, you know, to his district, I'm running again. I think we would have heard from him earlier if he were not running, so that the seat, you know, would be open, players could mount campaigns, etc. Flip side of that, he is still the chairman of Ways and Means right now. You just don't walk away from that. You don't leave your party hanging. So I believe he's going to run for re-election. I believe he'll win re-election. Then the question comes, what happens after that if the United States House goes Republican? And right now, there's a lot of us that are reading the tea leaves and thinking that there's an opportunity for the House to go to the Republicans. Richie is the chairman of Ways and Means at least until January 2023, even if there's tough elections come this November. Then the question comes, how long would he want to stay there? He's reached the top already, you know? And the other piece of this, Lesser running for lieutenant governor, no great secret. Everybody knew that Eric had an interest in the 1st Congressional District. Now he's doing this. This opens that up for other players, more players perhaps, to look at the 1st Congressional District. Camden County is always the major domo in the 1st Congressional District as far as votes are concerned. But, you know, this Lesser being out of it opens it up for some folks from the north, I think, as well. So I hope I answered that question as directly as I could. Whatever happens, the clock, at some point in some time, in the first congressional district, folks, businesses, chambers of commerce, economic development officials, mayors, we all are thinking about, we're thinking about it now. What happens when the fellow that brings it back for us isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we can just take out a Lloyd's of London policy on him and make sure he's going to be there for the next 20 years. Things change, So hopefully we get everything we can and need from him now. And he seems to be very tuned into that. So
well, I am sure we're going to be talking about that for a long. You and I could talk about Richie for about an hour and a half, just on him and his campaigns and what he's been able to do. But clearly, somebody with that kind of influence in Washington has been a tremendous asset to us in Western Mass. And whatever he decides to do, we certainly wish him well in doing it. Tony Cignoli, this has been a lot of fun. I so appreciate you joining me, and we're going to have to do this again very soon.
Amen, my friend. This was an absolute blast. I always used to say it to you, but I feel like I just had a quad espresso, man. You got my brain kicked in. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Again, if you like what you hear, please press subscribe and like if you're listening on YouTube. And, of course, you can feel free to join us at theadamwrightshow.com. You can also send me an email at theadamwrightshow@gmail.com. We'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks again for listening.